Oh, but I hear you ask, what does the devil have to do with anything? And the answer to that is simple and has already been handed to us on a silver platter. You ready? The Davy back fights. Hello my fellow wannabe Straw Hats and welcome back to the One Piece saga, where today we'll be continuing our way through the absolute behemoth of an arc that is Dressrosa, and delving into the quite peculiar reveal of Gear 4th. Though before we do that, this is the second video of my Dressrosa coverage, so feel free to catch up on the first part in case you haven't yet. But we've got a ton to talk about, so without further ado, let us dive in. When we left off, Doffy had just activated the infamous birdcage, so that's exactly where we'll start. For me, hands down the best part here was the announcement of what is basically a battle royale, with the Straw Hats being prime targets. And while people like Law, King Riku, Luffy, and Sabo have a measly 3 stars, God D Usopp has 5. As I said last time, I was all in on this joke and I couldn't be happier that it got turned into a running gag for the rest of this arc. Usopp suddenly just becoming an absolute legend is the type of shenanigans I love, especially with the whole Sogeking thing we've already seen. And before you leave a comment about me not liking Buggy, it's different, okay? Usopp good? Buggy bad, okay? It's really as simple as that. Another thing that I also raised last time is the whole Zoro versus Pebbleboi fight, and that continues here. And the thing I really enjoyed as their fight went on is how it permanently changes the very structure of Dressrosa. I've talked about permanence a whole bunch in One Piece already, but when it comes to these ridiculously over-the-top fights, I love it when at least a part of them actually has real consequences, because again, these fights are absolutely massive. Also, throughout this entire arc, I had a feeling that Zoro's eye might finally open, but it never did. So that is still very sus. The one thing that sort of confused me here was the whole black blade talk. Are they just swords coated in hockey? I guess this is just a faulty assumption on my part, because I assumed that it being black was just a way to convey hockey to us as the audience. But is it really black in-universe as well? And if so, is every black blade just a sword covered in hockey? TLDR, I am honestly a little bit confused, and I guess only time will tell. Another fight I really want to mention is the Franky versus the little baby man one, as it seriously caught me by surprise. I'll be honest, at first, I really wasn't interested in his side story at all, but once we suddenly got to hear the little baby man's backstory, I couldn't help but be invested in seeing this whole thing through. We usually get at least some backstory of the big bads, but suddenly getting a full-fledged one for what is a fairly minor villain caught me by surprise. But hey, I think it was more than worth it. Especially when it comes to these sorts of underground, shady business type of groups. Many of the characters on the surface can seem as plain evil, while in reality, most of them will have deeply tragic backstories that may or may not be the core reason why they joined the organization in the first place. And our little baby man is no exception, because his backstory did reveal a lot of the underlying complexity of his seemingly nonsensical attire and personality. And when it comes to the fight itself, it's also a bit of a weird one, since it's mostly just a contest between which one of them can take the most hits while discussing their philosophies on life, and not really actively fighting each other. Considering just how much fighting we've already seen elsewhere, I think this was a nice and creative change of pace in that regard. So yeah, a pretty big W for what is a very minor villain. And then we get to what might just be the most, for lack of a better word, intriguing fight in this arc, as we see Sabo face off against Fujitora. Number 1, Sabo promising to never lose a brother again was absolutely incredible. And him not being the least bit shaken while he is standing up against an admiral was seriously a top tier moment. And the fact that he still uses a pipe to fight was just the cherry on top. Number 2, it was already clear that Sabo is an absolute monster when it comes to combat, but with Ace's fruits, the dude just looks unstoppable. Which is very nice for me, because the animation in the scene as they just flex on each other time after time was beautiful. But number 3, considering how this arc would end, I am particularly curious about their discussions during the fight. I mentioned this briefly last time, but with literally every single one of Fujitora's actions, I was just left asking whether there's still something so much bigger behind the scenes that we're still unaware of. Because at this point, I'm convinced Fujitora isn't making calculated risks. The dude legit knows what's going to happen. And all we're seeing here is him finding justifications for his actions. For example, obviously he knew who Luffy was at the start of the arc, but instead of causing a fuss, he just tells him that it's better for the both of them that he doesn't know. So why didn't he stop Luffy here? He says that it's because Sabo was too strong, while in reality, he knew that Sabo would be perfectly fine with striking up this sort of deal. And at the end of the arc, why didn't he stop Luffy again? Well, it's because of the dice. It's like he knows the outcome of all of these situations and is merely finding a reason to justify his actions. And considering we've already heard of prophecies and everything else of that nature, it just makes me wonder, who is this dude? But hold that thought for now. Now it is time for us to enter basically what is the climax of Dressorsa, starting with Doffy's flashback. And before I say absolutely anything else, what the f is under those shades? Dude's been wearing them since he came out of the womb, it seems like. Prep your tinfoil because we'll get to that in a bit. But when it comes to his backstory, big surprise, dude's as evil as they come. Though most importantly, we find out that he is indeed a former world noble. And importantly, apparently he has some treasure that has given him leverage to control the entirety of the world government. And apparently, it is so powerful that it would shake up the entire world. Number one, this doesn't seem to bode well for his capture, because if it is indeed true, I'm guessing he'll be able to get out fairly easily. But number two, I truly have no clue what this is about. Considering he wanted Law's power to become immortal, I can't even begin to guess what his next step might be. Could it be some sort of legendary fruit, because if he was immortal, then maybe he could have an infinite amount of fruits? Wait, hold up, is Blackbeard immortal? Though speaking of flashbacks, this nicely leads us into Law's backstory. Before I say anything else, the biggest revelation here is that Law is also of the D lineage. And as Corra would say, those with the name of D are sworn enemies of God who have been set free. I warn you about tinfoil. Let's go. What absolutely broke my brain here is what we hear from Corra. He tells Law to keep the fact that he is a part of the D lineage a secret no matter what. And while I have truly no idea what's up with his middle name Water being taboo, I do have yet another theory regarding the D lineage. Keep in mind that both Corra and Doffy were once world nobles, meaning that they may know things that essentially no one else we've ever met does. And with the whole sworn enemies of God thing, I can't help but immediately link that to the devil fruits. It's been shown that the world nobles do very much see themselves as gods, right? Each and every time we've met one, they have been total douches. And we also know that the world government is responsible for the Void Century. And we know that Joy Boy lived during the Void Century. So what if the reason why devil fruits are called devil fruits is because Joy Boy made a deal with the devil, whatever that is in the world of One Piece, and created the fruits which were meant to fight the world government and to set people free from their oppressive rule. And by doing something so massive, his bloodline was marked as one with massive importance and became the Will of D as we know it today. Oh, but I hear you ask, what does the devil have to do with anything? And the answer to that is simple and has already been handed to us on a silver platter. You ready? The Davy backfight. Remember Long Ring Longlands, the arc that made very little sense? Yeah, it's coming back. I admit, originally, it completely flew over my head, but now that we're getting phrases like enemies of gods, oh boy, it is time to flex my pirate lore muscles. Which are admittedly very small, but okay. The thing with the Davy backfight was that people follow the rules as a tribute to Davy Jones. But do you know who Davy Jones is? Well, in nautical folklore, Davy Jones is also known as the Sailor's Devil. And because we know for a fact that spirits like the Klabautermon exist, it makes me ask the question of, what if the reason why people lose the ability to swim is because of the metaphor itself? Davy Jones's locker literally means to drown. By eating a fruit, and by extension making a deal with Davy, he takes away your ability to swim. So, why did the government cause the Void Century then? Well, I think that those who have made a deal with Davy personally are a lot more dangerous than we know, which is why they fear the D lineage specifically, and why that part of history was erased. I'm about 4 layers deep into my tinfoil already, so feel free to tear this theory to shreds. But I think it's fun to think about, and trust me when I say this isn't even the craziest theory I've thought about. Alright, back to more sensible matters. As is trend with Oda, a character backstory means an absolute tragedy. And in the case of Law, that couldn't be more true. I could probably make an entire video on this flashback alone because it is incredibly dense. The entire premise of the white lead disease, which just went ignored out of sheer greed, is some grade A commentary on many things in the real world. But that then dooming Law and sending him down the spiral of just sheer destruction was brutal. Again, I could talk about this for a very long time, but I just want to skip to the absolute legend that is Corra, who after hearing that Law is a D, immediately tells him to stay away from Doffy. And I'm sorry for jumping around, but the whole "he didn't save you because you were a D, he saved you because he loved you" was just, why Oda? Why do you do this to me? But yeah, there's so many things to mention here, from Corra seemingly being terrible to children, while in reality he's just trying to scare them away from Doflamingo, to them literally traveling across the world in search of a doctor and all of that being in vain. All of it was just so bittersweet. And then there are those final scenes, where his whole tripping gag actually turns out to be fatal, as he falls right into those pirates, but still keeps the USOPP fruit hidden long enough to just force feed it to Law. And as if that hadn't already blasted my feels, his final conversation with Doffy was just brutal as he plays off the entire thing as if he was actually talking to him, while in reality, he just tells Law, "I'm a Marine, I'm sorry I lied to you, I didn't want you to hate me." Man, did that hit hard. I've said this many times and I'll keep saying it, when it comes to writing character backstories and getting you attached to them, Oda is simply a master. Though this now makes me fear one thing only. Please don't tell me Law will pull a Corra and say that he is paying his life forward by performing the perpetual youth surgery on Luffy. Remember how I talked about Luffy burning his life away in Impel Down in Marineford with Eva's energy hormone? And then remember Second Gear also burns his life away? And even ignoring all the beatings he's taken, his lifespan is already cut a lot. Don't get me wrong, obviously I don't want to see Luffy just die. But if Law were to give up his life to save Luffy, now that would be a real blasting of the feels considering how much I've grown to like him. And yes, once again, I find myself writing an apology letter like I did to Rayleigh. I am sorry for calling Law sussy boy, this dude's as good as they come. I think. Returning to the present though, it's time for Sniper King God D Usopp to shine once again as he needs to knock out Sugar a second time. And being the absolute legend that he is, of course he hits. And while yes, the fact that he used the projection of himself to scare her again made me giggle a whole bunch, what's more interesting here is the fact that we see him enter a sort of a hyper-focused state, which essentially allowed him to see through walls. So now the question arises of, does Usopp actually have incredibly strong observation haki? Like, even stronger than the Giga Chads we've seen? Obviously we've seen characters feel others' presences and stuff like that. But hey, Doffy couldn't even see Kid Law in the chest right in front of him, while God D Usopp is seeing targets at least a couple 100 meters away through walls. So, if you ask me, God D Usopp is clearly stronger than Doflamingo. And speaking of Doffy, it's here that round 1 begins, as Law and Luffy take on Old Flamingo and the Snot Dude. Number 1, the Snot Dude is so annoying and I hate literally everything about him, though I did absolutely love seeing Law and Luffy tag team Doffy with a whole bunch of mixed techniques. But like I said last time, I do think that Law's use of his powers throughout this arc has unfortunately been quite inconsistent. He goes from running around without barely using any of them to pulling Giga Chad plays like we see here. Honestly, I think his power is just too overpowered and Oda didn't really know what to do with him. Because again, he didn't use Shambles before, here he's using it all the time. Another thing that I really enjoyed in this one was Bellamy. Obviously, it is very much in Doffy's character to use absolutely every ounce of leverage over people he can get, and the way he still strung along Bellamy was obviously incredibly dark, but I think it was very well done. And yeah, also like I said last time, I never expected to say this, but I am glad that Bellamy finally found freedom. And then there's Corra standing by Law's side in the fights, which scored a home run in whacking me right in the feels. Though before we get to round 2, I do have a major problem with this fight, and yes, it's probably one you already expected. When Law lost his arm, I immediately thought, wow, Oda is actually going all out. Taking a character's arm off is a very bold move since it can cause a whole bunch of unexpected problems in future arcs. Even small things like him not being able to operate things that require 2 hands, etc. Though I thought that this would be the absolute perfect climax in his literally lifelong fight against Doffy. Him having to sacrifice a part of himself to win against this unimaginably strong demon of a man would have been such a bittersweet moment. Obviously, it's a tragic loss, but think of it like paying forward Corra's sacrifice. He did it to make sure that Luffy has a chance against Doffy, because remember that his organs were literally destroyed by Law. Sure, Doffy says that he can sew them back together, but there must have been at least some damage that he couldn't heal right away, making Luffy's victory possible. So yeah, once again I think One Piece has a serious problem with just not being able to commit to loss. And I get that he has the USOPP fruit and that alone should make it extremely easy for him to get his arm back, but it's not like it would be the first time in this arc where he didn't use his powers in a ultra optimized way. TLDR, yes, in terms of his powers and everything like that, obviously he wouldn't lose it, but in terms of making it a satisfying conclusion narratively, I think he should have lost his arm. Also, side note, I know this is coming completely out of the blue, but I think Law's hat is going to be super important just like Luffy's Straw Hats. I already found the whole him getting his heart back and immediately summoning his hat a bit funny in Punk Hazard, but I think there might be more to it, especially with how important Law is seeming as a character. But I digress. As their battle heats up, complete chaos has enveloped Dressorsa and we see all the Coliseum contenders take on all the other executives. Though I'll be honest, there were very few that I was at all interested in seeing. Of course, the Bartolomeo, Robin, and Blonde Boy team-up was awesome, and the whole Bartolomeo finishing the Ruptures dude with a Luffy hit was a ton of fun, but many of the others just got old quick. Though I do absolutely love the King Punch dude and his ability. Something tells me having that might come in very handy when we set our sights on Marie Joie, just saying. And also in the midst of all this, we once again see Fujitora, who says that he is going all in and bets on Luffy winning against Doffy. Considering all the fate stuff I talked about last time, this scene seemed a little different to me. It may absolutely be me reading into things way too much, but I thought this was the first time where Fujitora actually was not certain of the outcome. So maybe Fujitora's predictions have a hard time predicting what those with the initial of D are capable of or something like that? Who knows, all of these are complete shots in the dark. Though cutting back to Luffy versus Doffy, oh boy, there is a ton of great stuff to talk about here. First off, Luffy blocking Doffy's kick is just a 10 out of 10 shot, and I'd imagine is very iconic for this arc. And then once their hockey begins to clash, oh, the eye candy was just excellent. Though I do wonder what's the deal with changing colors of hockey and whether that's purely visual or not. Once we saw the big beard dude fight Luffy, their hockey was almost entirely blue. Though when we saw the King Punch guy, his colors were black and red. And now that we get to Doffy, we have this red, black, purplish tinge to it. Obviously, red, black, and purple are like the universal colors for corruption, so it could just be that, but who knows, I have a feeling all of this is just eye candy. Oh, and the shot of Sabo just looking up to the mountain only to see the pure carnage was excellent. Oh, and also Law demanding to stay behind to watch the fight, no matter what the outcome, was so incredibly cool. So again, I am so sorry for calling you sus, Law. Though, we'd soon learn that all of that was merely the beginning, as Luffy begins to whip out one of his new tricks, fourth gear. And, my reaction was alarmingly similar to Doffy's.
What is this?
Luffy becoming a Giga Chad seriously caught me off guard, and I got a very good laugh out of it. Though that aside, this raised countless questions for me. Number one, that wispy stuff, which so far I've just assumed to be steam, clearly isn't steam, is it? With second gear, it legit looked like he was just steaming. But with this, it's clearly swirling around him. So, is that like raw hockey or something? But alright, that's not even that important. What's more important is what we see during Luffy's transformation. Because as he transforms, we see those same very sus wispy hair looking swirlies come down and imprint themselves over what looks to be Luffy's devil fruits. And they then become tattoos on his chest. Now, unless I'm forgetting something massive, this is definitely the first time we've seen Luffy's fruits actually be altered and that having tangible effects on his body, right? Which nicely leads me on to Doffy, whose fruit is apparently awakened. So the question arises of, is this like a first step toward Luffy's fruit awakening? Based on the whole wispy swirlies thing slowly taking over the fruits, it does seem like it isn't even the final form since it only stretches over a part of his fruit. So is his awakening that taking over the entirety of the fruit? Though considering we saw those patterns imprinted on Luffy, that would then imply that a full awakening would completely cover his body, right? And remember Doffy's shades? What if the reason why his eyes are always hidden is because they're messed up somehow because of his awakening? Obviously, I'm throwing out completely blind guesses here, but considering that Luffy's fruits does seemingly undergo some sort of change as he enters fourth gear, perhaps if he were to push it even further, they would become permanent? In which case, it would affect his body as well? I don't know. Though speaking of Doffy and his fruits, it brings up the question of how come he's the first awakened fruit user we've seen? It's not even like Doffy's the strongest character we've met, right? So if an awakening comes with this sort of ridiculous power where you can literally turn strings into demonic spikes of death, why hasn't every big shot also pushed as hard as possible to awaken their fruits? Imagine someone like Akainu just changing literally everything into magma. At that point, everyone is toast. Literally. Okay, that was a bad joke, but you get what I mean. And yeah, I guess I'm just not supposed to quite understand it yet, because right now, it does seem a little bit weird. And what also caught me by surprise is that Luffy's fourth gear didn't spell defeat for Doffy. Because despite being knocked and kicked around countless times, the dude just doesn't quit. And it's then that we find out that after using fourth gear, Luffy needs at least 10 minutes to recharge. And as I've said many times before, when it comes to these sorts of power-ups, I always love a good Kiss Curse ability. So him basically becoming totally useless after coming out of fourth gear is an awesome addition. Though what makes this entire thing far more complicated is the fact that Jesus is on the move as well. And because Sabo is a legend, he swoops in just in time, and so we get Sabo vs Jesus round 2. Again, the animation here was absolutely excellent, and Jesus trying to play on Sabo's emotions by bringing up Ace was brutal. But what interested me the most is the reason for Jesus even attacking them. After seeing Luffy, his goal was to get his fruits, which leaves me with the question of, does he also know how to directly steal fruits? Unless he's got a basket of fruit hidden somewhere, killing Luffy wouldn't really help him, right? So what's up with that? And now I'm left asking, what if Blackbeard's unique power isn't actually stealing fruits and everybody could do it? I could embrace my tinfoil again and say that the whole multiple fruits thing is actually exclusive to the D bloodline, etc, but clearly all of those would be blind guesses, so I don't really think it's worth getting into right now. As usual, everything involving Blackbeard is a complete mystery. But hey, at least Sabo gave the douche a big bonk over his head. This video is brought to you by me. Do you wish these would come out faster? Well, yeah, me too. But I heard you like this little series called One Piece, so why don't you travel with me into the future, or present I suppose? Where I am already caught up with the manga for our weekly chapter discussions. These happen every Sunday live on Twitch and are later uploaded to my other channel, Kuroto TV, which also has some more experimental content from yours truly. I'd love to see you there, so feel free to pop in anytime. With that said, back to the video. Though with the cooldown on 4th gear expiring, Luffy goes all out and gives Doffy a solid run for his money. Perhaps not surprisingly, when it comes to the animation, I think this was by far the most impressive fight. And with how elaborate some of these scenes were here, I genuinely can't even imagine what they look like at present day. The only thing I fear is that we're going to have some power creep in the animation department, because some of the shots in this one are already so over the top that I can't even see what comes next. But hey, you won't catch me complaining, hype animation is always a win in my book. And yeah, I did mention him before, but the Coliseum dude constantly cheering for Luffy was just excellent. Though, with the fight over, I thought things would finally slow down, but I probably should have known better, because this is One Piece and they absolutely do not. Because one of the first things we hear is that Aokiji is now a member of Blackbeard's crew. And I'm sorry, what? Based on what we've seen of him, clearly he's a good dude. So could it be him throwing a Hail Mary and using the Blackbeard pirates as a way of getting rid of Akainu, and re-establishing the Navy under new, in his view, more just principles? Or probably more realistically, he's going undercover to stop Blackbeard from doing something very, very bad. Though yeah, it is literally just a throwaway line, and I'm guessing I'll hear more about it in around 400 episodes. Similarly, we also hear that Captain Kidd's alliance have set their sights on an emperor as well. Though unlike the others, this one is near and dear to us. Our boy Shanks. If I'm being honest, I highly doubt this will amount to anything. I'd love to be wrong, as it would very much yield some spicy drama, but considering what we saw in Marineford, I just don't see them taking on Shanks. Sure, we don't really know how strong they've become either, but let's be real, Shanks has way more allies, way more experience, and basically more of everything. So yeah, good luck boys. Something we'd already heard before and is repeated here is how Fujitora wants the Warlord system abolished. But this is a bit of a puzzling one. Obviously, in universe, it makes perfect sense. A number of the Warlords we've seen, despite technically being on the Navy's side, are clearly up to no good. But in a meta sense, how will the system being abolished affect what we're seeing in any way? Luffy's already gone around kicking out Warlord after Warlord, right? No one cares about Buggy, Law's on our side, Hancock is on our side, Kuma is gone, now Doffy is gone, and Mihawk's sort of in the middle. So, if you just get rid of the whole thing, it doesn't really change much, does it? I may totally be overthinking it, and it may legit just be a detail to establish Fujitora's views of justice, but who knows. Though we then get to what are some of my favorite scenes in this entire arc, because we get to see Sabo go to chill with the Strawhats. And because Oda is evil and doesn't want to make me happy, obviously we never even see Luffy and Sabo talk. Not cool. But we do see that Sabo has made a Vivre card of Luffy and hands out pieces of it to everyone else. And while I just said I may be overthinking the Warlord thing, this very much seems like another Chekhov's gun. So I'm going to make a completely baseless prediction for the funsies. Luffy's going to find himself in a situation similar to Ace, where he is somehow captured or something like that. And just on the brink of death, Luffy's fleet along with Sabo will come to save him, contrasting what we saw in Marineford. You know what? Make it even more fun and make him save him from Akainu. Okay, I admit that literally makes no sense. Though more importantly, we finally get the answer of why he never returned. And the answer is as tragic as it gets, because his memories returned only when he saw news of Ace's death. As I've said before, when it comes to these sorts of memory loss stories, it's extremely hard for us to really relate, because we can't really picture something like that. But just imagine opening the news one day, seeing an article of a person's death, and out of nowhere, gaining years of memories with that person. But just as suddenly you remembered those thousands of conversations and experiences, all of them were immediately invalidated because the person is dead. And the worst part, Ace died never even knowing that his brother was still out there. So even though Sabo clearly couldn't do anything to help it, just imagine the guilt he felt for never finding Ace. That was certainly a big oof. And yes, the scene of him leaving the 3 cups on Ace's grave was incredible as well. Though what might just be the biggest thing in this entire arc is our first proper glimpse of Kaido. We hear and very much see that he appears to be literally immortal and that all he's doing is searching for a way to die. And while these couple of minutes literally made me ask hundreds of questions, I'll only raise 4. Is this dude actually immortal? If so, was it Law's fruit that made him immortal, and if it was, who was it that sacrificed themselves to do it? And if all of those questions are answered, did Law pick Kaido as their target because he knows he's the only one who can undo his immortality? Oh boy, Law's ability really is just becoming more and more interesting. I still think that he will perform the immortality surgery on Luffy, but now that we actually have supposedly immortal characters already running around, it makes me wonder just how important he might actually turn out to be. It's also here where Sengoku arrives, and like, I love this dude. Yeah, he commanded Ace's death, but look at him. He looks like a cool Gramps, and I've never seen someone more happy about just chowing down on some rice crackers. So yeah, Sengoku is a cool dude. Though what obviously hurt the most is the brief conversation he has with Law, where 1, Sengoku tells that Corra literally lied to him only once to get Law's fruits. And 2, like I already mentioned before, Corra didn't save him because he was a D, he saved him just because he loved him. This was just downright sad, but I'm glad that we got to see Law at least get a tiny bit of closure. And on a similarly sad note, we also see that Kiros had supposedly spread a rumor that he wasn't Rebecca's father because he had been a criminal before and plans to distance himself from Rebecca. Luffy, being the Chad that he is, runs through all the Marines to ask if she's really okay with this. I mean, of course, this is Luffy, I shouldn't even be surprised, but again, Luffy is legitimately just the best. If it means making his friends happy, the dude will go to the ends of the world to make it so. He never pushed her to do anything, even saying, "Think for yourself, I have to leave soon." But he just wants to make sure that what she's doing is what she really wants. And oh boy, their reunion still hit me right in the feels. As I talked about in the first part, because of the bizarro pacing, I had seen those flashbacks about 340 times, but this final reunion still put a very nice bow on that story. Oh, and conveniently, Luffy just made another friend in royalty, just saying. One of the last things we see in Dressorsa is the brief fight between Luffy and Fujitora. Literally the only thing I wanted to say here was that Luffy announcing his moves is literally the most wholesome thing ever. The fact that even against an admiral he just wants the fight to be proper is just so Luffy, right? And then him just straight up saying, "It's because I kind of like you," was just the cherry on top. Though with that, Fujitora supposedly unleashes his power and threatens to destroy their entire escape route. Obviously, everyone here knows that he had zero intention of doing that. I mean, he literally could have used his gravity power on the ships to sink them instantly. But the scene I want to mention here is the crowd running out to protect the pirates, because Luffy drove people to the sea. Very cheeky, Oda, very cheeky. Another huge development is the fact that basically everyone we've met so far feels so indebted to Luffy that they pledge themselves to the Strawhat FLEET. Because this is Luffy, he outright tells them that he won't be any kind of boss, and that they can just be friends and help each other. But the only thing I'm left asking is, how many people has Luffy already assembled? This dude's literally going around the world and assembling an army without even wanting or trying to do that. I swear, once the final war against the world government rolls around, this dude will literally command all the emperors, all the warlords, and an army of 500,000. Though as our crew sets off, we see who I think are Lucci and Spandam. Number 1, Robin broke the dude in half, so how in the miracle is he here? And number 2, are we going to see Lucy versus Lucci? Because I seriously need that. Well, regardless, obviously CP0 has been knocking around Dressorsa, so it's entirely possible we may see some familiar faces again. But yeah, I guess breaking someone in half is still not enough sometimes. Huh. Though just before we leave this one, we cut a long way from Dressorsa, where we see Nami and the Sunny Squad run through some islands. Honestly, I've got no clue what's going on here, so the only thing I want to mention is Sanji noticing the insignia, which immediately sent my mind into overdrive. With how long it's lingered on, does Sanji have some links to it? Technically speaking, Sanji's past before Baratie is still unaccounted for, right? I mean, how did he even find himself on the ship before he met Zeph? And now we have his wanted poster, which we'll get to in a bit, be the only one to say only alive. Certainly a peculiar detail if you ask me. So maybe we're getting more Sanji lore? I suppose only time will tell, because I'm not even certain they've gotten away from Big Mom's pirates. But of course, another adventure is behind us, which means party time. Because of the super big cast, even more so than usual, this was just a ton of fun to watch after all the craziness we've seen. Everything from Luffy screaming at them about not being a boss, to Zoro being way too buddy-buddy with Law, and everything in between. And another development are the updated bounties, which are cool and all, but the 3 things that seriously made me crack up were: number 1, the fact that Bartolomeo has made a fan collection at all. Number 2, the fact that Usopp's wanted poster is actually God Usopp now. And 3, Chopper's bounty doubled even though he wasn't even there. But despite it proportionally growing way more than anyone else, it is of course still just 100 berries. Though with that, with the absolute wild adventure that was Dressorsa behind us, it is time to supposedly and hopefully reunite with our crew in Zou. And that is Dressorsa. As promised, I'll offer up 2 rankings, one with the horrendous pacing and the other that is purely based on story. So let's start with the goods. The proper ranking that'll be added to the tier list, and while it is also likely still affected by the bizarro pacing, will be mostly based on the story. For me, this is a very solid A tier arc, but not quite beating out good ol' Arlong Park. And yeah, as I think I've already gone on about at length, this one was quite a bit of a mixed bag. I absolutely adored the setting, and I'd easily put it above Enies Lobby when it comes to that. I also like Doffy magnitudes more than Lucci, but then again, in this one it felt like a lot of the things we saw were, for lack of a better word, just convenient. But anyway, I don't want to rehash everything again, so that is the ranking. As for the bizarro pacing, this would probably be a middle-of-the-road B, somewhere around Skypiea and Baratie, which I think actually goes to show just how strong this arc actually is. Because even in spite of, let's be honest, the horrendous pace, it is still very solid. And that's the video. This one is long enough as is, so I just want to say a massive thank you to our current patrons who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. Without you, there'd be a whole lot less of my ramblings, so seriously, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!